How did one pilot's broken wingtip turn his P-47 into a zero killer? It is a question that defies conventional military logic. In the brutal, unforgiving calculus of aerial combat, damage is a prelude to disaster, a sentence of death written across the skin of a warplane. But on one afternoon, high above the sprawling jungles of New Guinea, a young American lieutenant faced a seemingly impossible choice. His massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, a plane built for power and durability, had been grievously wounded in a furious dogfight. Crippled, alone, and hundreds of miles from home, he was about to become easy prey for one of the most agile and deadly fighters of the Second World War, the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0. What happened next would not only defy the odds, but would rewrite the rules of aerial survival, transforming a catastrophic structural failure into a singular, devastating advantage. Our story begins in the sweltering, disease-ridden heat of the Southwest Pacific Theater in the summer of 1943. The airbase at Port Moresby, New Guinea, was a muddy, primitive outpost, a front line in a war of attrition against a tenacious and skilled enemy. Here was stationed the 348th Fighter Group, the Hell Hawks, flying the formidable Republic P-47D Thunderbolt. The P-47 was a behemoth, weighing over 7 tons, fully loaded and powered by a monstrous 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp radial engine. It was a flying tank. Pilots revered it for its ability to absorb staggering amounts of damage and still bring them home. But it was not a delicate plane. In contrast, the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0 was a predator of the skies. Incredibly lightweight, with a phenomenal rate of climb and a turn radius that made it a lethal opponent in a close-in dogfight. The established American doctrine was clear: never, ever try to turn with a zero. You use the Thunderbolt's superior diving speed to execute slashing, hit-and-run attacks. Boom and zoom. To engage in a turning fight was to invite certain destruction. Into this arena stepped Lieutenant James J.J. Luma, a young pilot from Ohio. He was one of the new breed, learning the harsh lessons of the Pacific War on the fly. His aircraft, a P-47D he'd christened Lucky Lulu, was his fortress and his home. On the morning of August 14, 1943, Luma and his squadron were briefed for a bomber escort mission. Their objective: protect a formation of B-25 Mitchells targeting Japanese shipping and airfields near Wewak, a major enemy stronghold. The mood was tense. Intelligence reported heavy concentrations of Zero fighters in the area. Every pilot knew the statistics, the terrifying performance envelope of their adversary. As they climbed into their cockpits, the heavy scent of avgas and jungle decay hanging in the air, they knew the odds. Today, the sky would not be friendly. The flight north was a study in mounting anxiety. The Thunderbolts climbed to 20,000 feet, the world below shrinking into a vast, green carpet of impenetrable jungle and jagged mountains. The drone of the engines was a constant, vibrating hum in their cockpits. Then, the radio crackled to life. Bandits. 10 o'clock high. The sky, once empty, was now dotted with specks that rapidly grew into the distinctive, sleek profiles of Mitsubishi Zeros. They swarmed like angry hornets, diving on the American formation with terrifying speed. What followed was pure chaos. The neat formations disintegrated into a whirling, violent ballet of death. Tracers streaked across the azure canvas. The deafening roar of .50 caliber machine guns from the P-47s mixed with the sharper crack of Japanese 20mm cannons. Pilots fought for altitude, for position, for their lives. Luma stayed tight with his element leader, his eyes constantly scanning the sun-drenched sky, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw a Zero latch onto the tail of a fellow Thunderbolt. He radioed a warning, rolled in, and squeezed the trigger. The 8 heavy machine guns in his wings roared, a solid stream of lead stitching across the Zero's wing route. The enemy fighter shuddered, then erupted into a fireball, pieces of wreckage spinning away into the void. But in the kill, Luma had become vulnerable. He had lost his speed and altitude. As he leveled out, a gut-wrenching impact shook his Thunderbolt. A stream of 20mm shells from another, unseen Zero, had found their mark. The sound was like being inside a steel drum being struck by a sledgehammer. Shrapnel peppered the fuselage. A warning light for the oil pressure flashed on his panel. He had taken a hit, but lucky Lulu was still flying. He shoved the throttle forward, nose down into a steep dive, using the Thunderbolt's legendary weight to build up velocity and escape the fray. The Zero on his tail, unable to match the dive, fell away. By 14:30 hours, the main engagement was over. The surviving Zeros had disengaged, low on fuel and ammunition. The American formation, battered but successful, turned for home. Luma, his oil pressure stabilizing but his aircraft handling sluggishly, began the long, lonely flight back to Port Moresby. He was alone in a damaged plane over hundreds of miles of hostile territory. The relief was short-lived. A flicker of movement in his rearview mirror. His blood ran cold. A single Zero, piloted by a seasoned veteran, had stalked him. It was now closing in fast, positioning itself for the killing shot. The hunter had become the hunted. Luma's mind raced. He was too low on fuel and too damaged to try another high-speed dive. The Zero was already in gun range. He was trapped. Standard procedure was useless. In a moment of sheer, desperate instinct, he did the one thing his training had explicitly forbidden. He hauled back on the control column and stood the massive Thunderbolt on its wing, pulling it into a hard, maximum performance turn. The G-forces slammed him into his seat, his vision tunneling. The airframe groaned in protest. He was trying to turn with a Zero. For Lieutenant Luma, the world outside the cockpit became a spinning blur of green jungle and blue sky. The scream of the wind and the straining roar of the R-2800 engine were deafening. He could see the Zero pilot clearly now, a dark shape in the cockpit, confident in his machine's superiority. The Japanese pilot, sensing an easy kill, matched the turn, expecting the heavy American fighter to wallow and stall. But something impossible happened. The P-47 held the turn. Inside the cockpit, Luma fought the controls. The stick was heavy, vibrating in his hand, but the plane was turning tighter than it ever had before. It made no sense. The Zero pilot, a Lieutenant Junichi Tadeo of the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service, was equally baffled. His lighter, more nimble fighter should have easily outturned the lumbering American. Yet, there it was, staying inside his turn radius, its 8.50 caliber guns presenting a constant, looming threat. Tadeo tightened his turn further, pushing his own aircraft to its limits, his wings shuddering as they approached a stall. Still, the Thunderbolt remained, an unshakable shadow. The two aircraft were now locked in a death spiral, circling each other at an altitude of barely 5,000 feet. It was a deadly waltz where the first to make a mistake would die. Luma knew he couldn't keep this up forever. His fuel gauges were dipping into the red. The strange, newfound agility of his plane was a temporary reprieve, not a solution. He was in an impossible situation. He could not escape, and he could not sustain the fight. The Zero pilot, frustrated and confused, decided to end it. He performed a classic, brilliant maneuver, a climbing chandelle, intending to roll back down on the P-47's vulnerable topside for a definitive shot. This was the moment of absolute crisis. Luma was at his most vulnerable, his energy sapped, his options exhausted. He watched the Zero climb, a silhouette against the sun, knowing the next pass would be the last. He had defied the odds for a few miraculous minutes, but physics and the skill of his opponent were about to claim their price. The triumph of human spirit was about to be crushed by the cold, hard reality of aerial combat. The end seemed inevitable. As Luma tracked the Zero's climb, his eyes, almost by chance, flicked to his own wing. What he saw was both horrifying and electrifying. The solution to the mystery, the reason for his impossible turn performance, was right there. A 20mm shell from the initial attack had not just peppered his wing, it had nearly sheared off the outer 3 feet of his left wingtip. The metal was grotesquely bent upwards, hanging on by shredded spars and skin. It was a catastrophic failure, a wound that should have sent him spiraling to the jungle below. Asterisk, but in that moment of clarity, Luma's mind, a fusion of pilot's instinct and basic aerodynamics, understood. The torn, upturned wingtip was acting as a massive, unintended flap or aileron. It was creating immense drag on his left wing, yanking it around, forcing the aircraft into a tighter turn than its design ever allowed. His broken, plane was, in fact, broken in his favor. The very damage that should have killed him had given him a single, unique, and fleeting weapon. The Zero was now at the apex of its climb, beginning its lethal rollover. This was it. One chance. Luma didn't try to run. He didn't try to dive. He embraced the damage. He stood the P-47 on its good wing and pulled into the tightest, hardest turn he could manage, directly into the Zero's predicted flight path. The damaged wing bit into the air. The drag was tremendous, but the turn was brutally tight. He was no longer flying a standard P-47. He was flying a one-of-a-kind weapon. Lieutenant Tadeo, committed to his dive, rolled out expecting to find the Thunderbolt struggling to escape. Instead, he flew directly into Luma's gun sight. The P-47 was already there, waiting, having turned inside the Zero's maneuver. It was an ambush born of desperation and brilliant improvisation. Luma didn't hesitate. His thumb pressed the trigger. A 3-second burst from his 8 machine guns walked directly up the Zero's fuselage, from engine to cockpit. The Japanese fighter seemed to stop in midair, then disintegrated into a cloud of flame and debris. The sky, moments before filled with the scream of engines, fell silent. The return to Port Moresby was a nerve-wracking trial. The damaged wing threatened to fail completely at any moment. Luma nursed his crippled Thunderbolt, Lucky Lulu, over the Owen Stanley Mountains, his fuel gauges reading empty as his wheels touched down on the dusty runway. He shut down the engine and sat in stunned silence, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. He had survived. When ground crews inspected his aircraft, they were aghast. The damage was extensive. The shredded wingtip was a testament to the violence of the encounter. The official after-action report confirmed his kill, but the story of how he achieved it spread through the squadron like wildfire. Lieutenant James Luma was not awarded the Medal of Honor for this action, but he did receive the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement and heroism in aerial combat. His verified kill of Lieutenant Junichi Tadeo, a respected and experienced pilot, was a significant morale booster. The legacy of this engagement, however, went beyond a single victory. Luma's desperate maneuver provided combat engineers and tacticians with a fascinating, if macabre, data point. It was a brutal lesson in applied aerodynamics, demonstrating how induced drag and asymmetric lift could be manipulated, however dangerously, to alter a plane's performance. While no one would ever recommend shearing off a wingtip as a viable combat tactic, the incident underscored a fundamental truth of war. In the crucible of combat, innovation is born of necessity, and sometimes, salvation is found in the most unlikely of places, even in a broken wing. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. A story of a broken machine, a desperate pilot, and a victory snatched from the jaws of certain defeat. Subscribe to this channel as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.